Okay, the Indian sky is not blue, it's gray.
This is just so, I'm being a hater, I guess, because this is just like painful to sit and like hear.
It's opaque. You can
Is like
literally go.
fifth so far. Chad, look at a country called Chad is like the second biggest po- polluter. Seriously, Chad, and it has like the rainbow flag. What?
Therefore, I'm very
Dude,
excited.
these guys are so bored, man. They're like, oh, just finish already. They're so bored.
You speak later on this evening.
God, that
Mr.
dude is
President,
almost
these are your
sleeping,
speakers,
dude.
and they are 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours.
That does not matter, dude. That's not how you like. It doesn't matter how much you like sit down and explain to them. Hey guys, my name is Uday. I'll be reacting to the Oxford Union's climate change debate, and the speaker is Kriti Joshi. So let's get right to it.
And now look to Kriti Joshi, Hertford College, to open the case with or without beatboxing for the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. One of the most iconic quotes of English literature, and also from one of my favorite novels. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you briefly not a tale of two cities, but a tale of two planets. Earth and Venus are essentially the same.
That's a really good argument. That's a really good argument, because I've always used that against climate change. When I'm against climate change deniers, right? I've always used Venus as it's such a simple example, but it works always because Venus, like it's essentially what's happening to Earth has already happened to Venus. The greenhouse effect has completely taken over Venus. So obviously you would allude to that as an example. That's pretty strong.
Size, essentially the same distance from the sun, and both have exactly the same amount of carbon. The difference is that over time on Earth, the carbon has been trapped in the ground in the form of coal, oil, natural gas, whereas on Venus, most of the carbon is in the atmosphere. The difference is that on Earth, the average temperature is around 50 degrees, whereas on Venus, it is around 850 degrees. Not just because it's slightly closer to the sun. Mercury is the closest to the sun and is around 3 times cooler than Venus. This is vaguely relevant to our current strategy of especially developing nations, of taking as much ground-based carbon and ejecting it into the atmosphere. Ladies and gentlemen, we must responsibly consider what we will be debating over tonight.
Yes.
The climate crisis is something where the consequences are not local, they are global. It affects all of us, and particularly, as I hope to show you in the next few minutes, the developing nations themselves. When Shashi Tharoor came to address the Union, he stated that the industrialization of the West was based on the deindustrialization of countries like India, and I agree.
I disagree. Go on.
We have to see what's at stake here. The climate crisis is causing reduced growing seasons, changing range of disease, droughts, species extinctions, severe storms. If anything, as Jack said, the West owe it to developing nations, such as India, to work together, share technologies and strategies that can help them.
Yeah, that's a very weak line of attack, because like you don't want people to feel like you don't want people to feel like you're saving them. You don't want people to feel like they have to save someone. No, I think the better line of argumentation would be, we have, like Hitchens said, I think Christopher Hitchens said it the best. Even if we were not actively accelerating the depletion of our ozone layer and the increased pollution and whatnot, even if we were not trashing our planet, it would be wiser to pretend that we are, because we only have one planet.
The argument about global warming, it seems to me, is not whether there is any warming, but whether or not human activity, or to what extent human activity is responsible for it. My line on that is we should act as if it is. For this reason, which I borrowed from Jonathan Schell's book on the nuclear question, The Fate of the Earth. We don't have another planet on which to run the experiment. We can't find out but one way. And just as we don't have the right to run an experiment in nuclear exchange on this planet, because it doesn't belong to us to that extent, we've no right to run an experiment in warming on it either. And if it turned out to be that there was no severe global warming threat, or that it wasn't man-made, then all we would have done would be make a mistaken analysis, which we could correct for. But if it turned out that there was and we'd done nothing about it, then it would be too late to do anything at all, and that would lead to disaster.
I have always felt that that line of argumentation is way superior to the one that she's saying. Basically, we owe it to people. Like, Britain somehow owes it to India. That's not the case, really. Britain, clearly, if you're talking about that, then India is like the third. I think India is like the third biggest contributor to the pollution in the entire world, if I'm not wrong about that. Yeah. I was wrong. India is way, way, way below. I think this is per capita, I think. Yeah, so India is like fifth so far. Chad, look at a country called Chad is like the second biggest polluter. Seriously? Chad. And it has like the rainbow flag. What? India is increasing. Bangladesh is also increasing, but this is again this is per capita and not, I don't think this is like the total aggregate. Yes, like India, Russia, I would be very hard pressed to not find the United States here. That makes no sense. It should be United States, China, and India. I mean, China, United States, India. But United States and China are like interlinked to each other because of their trade agreements and whatnot. So you can't really, blame. You have to take both of them together. While India is a lot more independent, I guess, in that sense.
Not mirror the same mistakes the British made in the Industrial Revolution of the 20th century.
Again, that line of argumentation is I completely disagree with that. I don't think that's how you unite the world, against a very serious threat that is global warming. And I refuse to call it climate change. I think that's propaganda.
Century. But before
yeah, I do think that global warming should be the actual term used and not climate change. I feel that's kind of it's kind of stupid,
Before I take us further into this nightmare on St. Michael's Street, it falls upon me to introduce the members of the opposition. I tried. We have just had the pleasure of hearing Jack Woolett's fine speech. Jack, who studies engineering at Pembroke College, is one of the most genuine and kind people that I know, and became a very close friend of mine during the 2 whole days he spent at the Union over the VAC. So,
burn.
I struggled to find anything particularly juicy from his friends to bring up tonight. Jack, your speech was great, but I will have to explain to my family in India who will listen to this debate on Audible that the lower voice on the recording is actually mine. Next in proposition, we have Peter Lilly, who is a British Conservative Party politician who has been a Member of Parliament since 1983. He has served as Secretary of State for Trade and Industry under Margaret Thatcher and currently serves on the Environmental Audit Select Committee and is extremely qualified to speak on this debate. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this very current topic. And finally, we will have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Paul Oquist, who has served as a Minister of the Government of Nicaragua and Secretary of Public Policy. He has been all over the world, working in Colombia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and is a leading expert on climate change. Therefore, I'm very excited.
Dude, these guys are so bored, man. They're like, oh, just finish already. They're so bored.
You speak later on this evening.
God, that dude is almost sleeping, dude.
And they are most welcome.
Yeah, it's alright. I would have done a better speech.
So I guess the first question is, do the developing countries need to change? Jack claimed that India ranked 22nd with respect to emissions. Well, the last time I was in India, which was in January, I was sitting with my cousin on our veranda, and she
Yeah, personal anecdote again. Like, oh man, I just wish that personal anecdotes.
was painting the god.
Point
She's,
of information.
all right, go ahead, Jack.
The ranking wasn't emissions. The ranking is for progress towards changing
All right.
towards the
Fine.
climate. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
accept.
because emissions, I'm pretty sure India would like rank higher. Speaking as an Indian, I'm pretty sure India would like rank higher. In emission. Yeah, jumps 2 spots higher, is now ranked 8. Yeah, obviously.
Accept that. Misquote of your statistic, but it still applies to my case. She's 3 years old, my cousin. So she did like the classic thing of with her painting, she left out the sky, and I, as a proud art A-level student, said to her, why don't you just fill this whole place, this white space here with color? And she literally turns to me, and she's like, Kriti, I don't have enough brown. And I'm like, okay, the Indian sky is not blue, it's gray.
This is just so, I'm being a hater, I guess, because this is just like painful to sit and like hear.
It's opaque. You can literally go outside and feel the pollution filling your lungs. We think of the sky as a vast, limitless expanse, but the reality is it's just a thin shell which continues to crack under the blunt hammer of our daily emissions. The accumulated amount of man-made global warming pollution that is up in the atmosphere, in that thin shell, is trapping the energy equivalent of 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours.
That does not matter, dude. That's not how you like. It doesn't matter how much you like sit down and explain to them. Okay? Doesn't matter how much there are like 15,000 like Hiroshima. They'll be like, okay, cool fact. They're gonna move on. That's not impressive. That's not a good.
365 days a year. Just picture that.
I pictured it and I moved on.
That is a lot of heat. And it's mostly in our oceans, resulting in newer, more catastrophic storms than we have ever seen before. The effect is everywhere. Houston, last July, it rained for 2 days, 162 billion gallons of water. That's someone picking up the Niagara Falls and allowing it to flow for 2 days on top of a very populated city. Of course, there are devastating results. For example, George Foreman's delayed visit to the Union. I mean, pretty devastating. Now,
I just like am I crazy for thinking this? I mean, it's like she was speaking in the AC hall and all of those were casting in the AC homes. Exactly, they have more electricity consumption than any person from developing nations. Historically, CO2 is emitted by, well, it's true, but it's not, bro. Because AC is like definitely good, but what really pollutes is the industries. And like let's say, I haven't researched much about this, but developing nations usually don't like. I like moving forward to electric and solar and like a lot. Like they have, especially the European Union, and like they have carbon taxes and whatnot, right? We don't have those. I mean, I think we don't have those. Does India have carbon tax? I'm pretty sure we don't. India does not levy. Yeah, we don't have. So it's kind of different. It's not the same as like saying, okay, this person is using AC, so like it's kind of hypocritical of them. Okay, that's not their argument. That's not her argument per se.
14 of the 16 years that have comprised the 21st century have broken temperature records. The global warming is resulting in.
It's good. It's good that she's giving data, but you have to be able to. You have to be able to humanize that. It's not good. Anyone can like take a data. Anyone can like literally search. Okay, how is global warming affecting us? Anyone can like literally go to Google and just search that. Your job as a speaker, as the person who's giving the speech, is to humanize those facts. Is to. Again, I'm not a huge fan of personal anecdotes, but if you're just gonna roll out stats again and again and again and again, you lose the argument because they don't care about that, because your opposition doesn't give two crap about what to the data that you give, basically, because they won't attack those data. They will be attacking lifestyle. They'll be attacking the appropriate changes that you have to make to your lifestyle, your life, your overall well-being, all those things are going to be their focus. They're going to say, if you're going to say that, okay, we have so much pollution, we have like 2 days of rainfall, like Niagara waterfall, and like boom, and George Foreman couldn't, like as a joke and whatnot. They're going to focus on the fact that this person wants you to not use your cell phones. This person wants you to not buy a truck. This person wants you to change your food eating habits. They're gonna go for they're gonna attack on a more personal level. So you have to, I feel that you have to, you can't just keep on rolling out stats, especially like it doesn't matter, especially ones that are like alarming, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, people are already sick of like hearing alarming, like, oh no, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, that is gonna, like the world is gonna end like in 10 years, 50 years. That kind of like stats game is not gonna work. So obviously I'm like nitpicking here, but
in microbial diseases from countries around the equator to spread to Western countries in higher latitudes that previously sustained temperatures that were cool enough to be hostile to these diseases. While places like North America and Britain have better public health systems, women in some regions of South America are advised not to get pregnant for 2 years. That is a red flag for something that we need to realize is a serious problem that requires a global effort towards fixing.
How?
I'll stop talking about how terrifying the situation really is, because I presume that I've scared you all enough thus far.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't give a shit, my dude. That's what you...
And if you're not scared, then you don't really understand where we are as a species. The fact of the matter is, from an economic perspective, the cost of the climate crisis is building up. Central bankers, like Governor Mark Carney, says that the vast majority of the carbon reserves are unburnable. This is a great risk to global economy. And if developing nations are not held to strict environmental standards now, they will develop their infrastructure around unsustainable are not held to strict burnable. This is a great risk to global economy. And if developing nations are not held to strict environmental standards now, they will develop their infrastructure around unsustainable practices.
I think Jordan Peterson has a better... I think I might not agree with everything that Jordan Peterson says, but he has an amazing critique on this, where he says basically, are you gonna stop developing nations from developing because you've already taken advantage of all the pollution and all the thing, right? So how can you, morally speaking, how can you say that, okay, you can't do this, it's a complicated one for sure.
Thus, to prevent the locking in of outdated environmental actions, equal environmental standards must be enforced internationally.
Carbon tax, probably.
The proposition will take offense at the word impose. There is an alternative of working together with these developing nations to provide a more sustainable set of environmental standards. However, in the history of the global warming crisis, humans have been incredibly short-sighted.
We've always been short-sighted.
Leaders of industrializing countries will place their country's immediate priorities before the vague, undefined future of climate change in this world. This means that the cheapest, fastest method of industrialization will be more preferable to one that is possibly slower, but in the long term more safe for the environment.
So in 7 minutes, she hasn't given, in my opinion, what's the topic? Yeah, okay. Maybe this is just one excerpt of the entire thing, but...
Environment as a whole. We cannot afford to look locally anymore. We have to look at the big picture. In a report by the Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development, it is argued that the potential economic and social impacts of environmental degradation are particularly serious for developing countries.
God, it's like she keeps on saying how it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's really bad. But she doesn't humanize it. She doesn't make the case strong. She just says, it's like, if you're reading a book, right? And the author keeps on saying that, okay, this person is scary. This person is a badass. This person is an uber duper badass. But he does nothing. He does nothing particularly of like substance. That's what's happening here. I kind of feel like that's what's happening here. In that, like, she says, okay, this is like really dangerous. This is really scary. Like this is, and this, she just rolls like a boring fact after another, and she doesn't like. Okay, So it just makes the entire her entire speech unnecessarily dry.
given their dependence on natural resources for economic growth and their vulnerability to energy, food, water security, climate change, and extreme weather risks. Populations in developing nations are more reliant upon, connected to, and impacted by the environment than populations in the developed world.
Okay.
The most at-risk populations for negative impacts from environmental degradation
Are going to be women and children.
are the rural, poor, and developing nations.
Yeah.
Proponents of equal environmental standards for developing nations argue that it is in the best interest of developing nations to put in place strict environmental policies in order to best protect their populations. So I can say with a definitive stance that environmental standards indeed should be imposed. But I am in no way suggesting that the West have a right to impose these standards on developing nations and just leave them to manage it alone. The fact of the matter is that most of these nations lack the infrastructure and expertise to implement the standards that are likely to be set.
That's not just the point, is it? It would immediately affect their economy. Why are you pretending that it's all going to be like kumbaya? They're going to be like happy and whatnot. They're not going to be happy. Why would India be happy with like US like giving sanctions on the Indian economy? Like because we use fuel, or because we take fossil fuels as our like major energy. Like I do you really think it's going to be like smooth sailing, or do you think it's like, oh yeah, the US is going to come and we're going to help them? No, my dude, no. Ah, man, God, I'm just sounding like a complete hater here. I know she doesn't mean anything by it, but it's so frustrating when I hear like climate change and global warming activists like just roll out boring stats and like pretend that it's going to be easy. It's such an easy solution. It's not going to be an easy solution. It's going to be an extremely complicated, rough process that really might not, we will never be able to like actually weigh the actual benefits of everything. I mean, we could with a carbon tax and whatnot, because those make an actual reliable change.
Many developing countries also have established some form of governmental structure that seeks to address their environmental problems. However, there are inherent barriers within these governments, such as corruption, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and lack of political willingness.
You know what? I take that back. I shouldn't have been like so hard on her. Yeah.
That are preventing visible differences from being seen, which is a classic case study would be my home country, India. And all the while, our world is dying. Of course, it is West.
She hasn't, again, she just keeps on saying, she just like, it's like, she doesn't elaborate on that. Maybe it's because it's an opening statement, maybe I have to just Google this, but I don't know. I'm like extremely unimpressed by the speech.
Western nations that have capitalized on industrial technology that have incurred these problems, they did it first. So it may well be thought of hypocritical of Western nations to demand developing nations who are struggling to improve their economies.
Not only hypocritical, I think Jordan Peterson argues it's evil, because you're essentially condemning poor people to like be even more poorer, because you are like essentially removing them access from LPG or like stove or fuel or gas, and asking them to like return back to like more asking them to like return to a more like sustainable one is going to be very expensive for them, and so it's not going to be sustainably for the environment, but not for their economy, and definitely not for their wallet.
To maintain those
So like he would argue that it's evil, but I disagree with that. But let's go on.
Standards that will probably hinder their economic progress. But we need to tackle this problem.
How are you going to tackle the problem? Address that. Don't just say it and move on.
Anything, the environmental standards placed on developing countries should serve as the global baseline, setting a precedent for.
Yeah, but again, you're not answering the real problem with that. Like, she's not actually answering the problem with that. Like,
for more industrialized countries to take the lead in the path to a sustainable future.
That's what's happening, yes.
It makes no sense to say the West have industrialized irresponsibly, and therefore the developing nations are allowed to just go ahead and do so as well.
Yes, fair.
These nations have negatively contributed to the environment.
But, I can say that fair, but You won't find a lot of Indians saying that though. I mean, you won't find a lot of people saying that. Because it's gonna be like, who are you to judge me when you've already done that? And not only done that, but done that to your extreme benefit. And to your people's extreme benefit, where you don't have major poverty like we do, or major like social issues like we do, because of your rapid advancement of your economy and your technology.
Through high populations, draining resources, and heavy pollution causing havoc all over the planet. Climate change is a global problem, and hence it is a global duty. Developing nations have the least incentive to commit to this,
Okay.
which is why the West must come in and aid in any way that they can to ensure that there is a
Which is, mention them, please.
safe environmental
Don't just say that we have to aid.
standards that are everywhere.
You have to mention a carbon tax. You have to mention this. You have to mention like more grants for like research on renewable energy. You have to like mention these things, dude, to make it rock solid. So that your opposition doesn't have a chance to like misrepresent or dismantle your argument.
There is no denying climate change is a serious threat. If we continue at the rate that we're going at, Bangladesh, the most crowded nation on earth, is set to submerge under the oceans by the end of this century.
And why should people in Britain care about that? That should be like, it's like I understand that's a heartless thing to say, but it's very much like again, like you said, human beings are extremely short-sighted. Why should they stop using their phones to avoid that future when they can just like feel bad about it when it happens? You know what I mean? If you know what, like, human beings are like that. So just saying these things are not, it's not an automatic win. It's just like you said, you have failed to establish emotional connection to your audience and to the opposition also. I think Sam Harris does this exceedingly well, and he can bring a maybe it's because he's a native speaker, I don't know, and she's not, but he has this incredible ability of just listing out a stat and then actually substantiating that claim, and then actually using an analogy to make you really fully realize the extent of his of that statistic. I just think that she comes off looking very condescending here.
All of us sitting here in this chamber today will probably still be alive to witness the fate of 150 million people as the sea reclaims the land on which they depend. It doesn't matter how developed or undeveloped this country is. There
Yeah, again, it's just appeal to emotions, but
is no country. We must oppose this motion.
But she's not doing it properly, so
The real debate here is not whether or not there should be environmental standards, but how they're implemented and imposed.
And you didn't give any, like, you didn't, like, you had like 10 minutes and you couldn't like elaborate on one single beneficial way that we could affect or we could manage carbon emissions. Like, it's just, this is my biggest problem with people who side with climate change a lot. It's that they're so condescending and they're so arrogant, that they forget that they use iPhones and they use MacBooks and they use lights and fans and everything. Like, and they are benefiting from a lot of the things that they claim to not be important, or so I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know. It's like yeah, I mean, obviously she's a good speaker, but I personally don't think that's I've heard this argument like 1,000 times, so it's nothing new. Anyways, if you like the video, like it. If you want to follow more content like this, subscribe. Did I just do the thumbs up thing? Okay, subscribe, and yeah, thanks for watching.